Alrighty, guys, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show, the place where you meet people behind ideas, strategies, and breakthroughs that help businesses grow and solve real problems. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga. And if you've ever felt like maybe modern marketing is just noise, or it's just more emails, or more outreach, or more automation, but somehow there's less connection and fewer results, then today's episode is going to be the one for you, because our guest actually believes the problem is not a lot of effort, but it's bad data and generic thinking. And as you will get to know, this show is the number one place to find exclusive conversations with experts who are rethinking the way things are done. And you can also discover new ways to solve challenges in your own business. So if you enjoy conversations like this, make sure you subscribe on whatever platform that you're watching this on, because every week we're going to be bringing you powerful conversations and insights from people that are shaping the future and business leadership. Now, today's guest is Musoke Shaibu, a marketing and PR strategist, CEO of Redial Media, and a man who's built what he calls intelligence operations rather than just another marketing agency. Now, Musoke, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Prosper. It's pleasure mine, and I've been looking forward to this almost 3 months now. And I was like, I need to, and I've been just checking my email, be like, I hopefully I don't miss. And yeah, the fact that it happened, I was like, okay, now this is a plus for me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I mean, obviously, you've got a lot to offer, and with the work that you're doing, you definitely are well placed to be on the show today. Now, for those that are tuning in and meeting Musoke for the very first time, he's the creator of Acumen. It is a proprietary intelligence engine that actually helps companies cut through market noise with live data, contextual intelligence, and AI driven research. Now, I've been digging around about Musoke only to find that, if you bring up a popular marketing tool that everybody loves, there's a good chance that he will actually look at it and say, you know what, if everybody's already using it, it's probably broken. And I was wondering, maybe
Uh,
he's got his own new set of tools and systems that is using. So today we're going to be exploring the mind of somebody who intentionally swims against the current. So we're going to be talking about why modern B2B marketing might actually be failing. And we're also going to be looking and exploring at what is and how sovereign data could actually change the way companies grow, and also one breakthrough moment that okay endured, where he landed 4 major clients in 2 months and generated over 2 million in revenue. And that basically validated his different way of thinking about growth. And there's just a lot of things that you might be missing out. But if you've ever followed the same strategies that everybody else is using and still felt like maybe something is not working in your marketing, I want you to drop a yes in the comments, because today's conversation might actually explain why this is actually happening. Now, Musoke, I could go on
yes.
and on and talk about things I'm not even qualified to talk about. Tell us a little bit about
Hmm.
yourself. How did you stumble upon this that you're working on right now?
Yeah. First things first. Thanks for the insightful introduction. I would say you pulled it quite better than I would have done myself. But yeah, maybe to perhaps just share a bit more of how I got even first into the B2B side of things. Back in 2018, I believe that's the exact date, I was drawn to the online marketing aspect. But I'll be very frank with you. I needed something that I can do in order to make money out of. Which by looking back, I'm like, okay, that was a terrible first thing to think of, best to think to approach, because if there is one thing we can all agree with is the digital side of things needs you to be a bit more skilled in order to make anything out of it. So by doing that, I eventually started out, okay, how and where can I learn how best to do these things? Obviously, YouTube was the very first instance, and as following or rather watching so many tutorials on YouTube, I'll be honest, it was overwhelming, and I believe right now it has gotten so much worse. So maybe like the first thing that I would say to anyone would be, I'll maybe like tone down on, rather choose a particular source of information that you're going to follow mainly, and then maybe like just adding something small. Otherwise you're going to perhaps just keep like watching, let's say, like the top 10 things to do with email marketing, or how to write the best 5 subject lines, and it's all going to be too much. The thing that I learned while reading a book, and I'll perhaps maybe plug in a bit, the book particularly that changed my view on how particularly everything turned out to be, was Jab Jab Right Hook by Gary Vaynerchuk, one of the big people that I was looking at in the industry within that particular space. So the second thing was, or rather the main aspect, was reading helped me quite a lot, and particularly that particular aspect. But there has, or rather there was a very big need of, okay, I'm not yet good enough, or rather I do not yet have sufficient environments to test. So I didn't rather go hardcore with email marketing in that particular instance, because there weren't as big environments to test from. There weren't clients that I could test with. I wasn't that as experienced as I could perhaps put it at this particular moment. So in that transition, I jumped around several areas. I jumped within SEO, I jumped within blogging, I jumped with anything that could do digital marketing. So I was kind of wearing multiple hats until I just decided to be like, you know what? Let me perhaps first do the B2C side of things, because within the Ugandan side of things, it yields results quite fast. And if you're running campaigns, let's say on Facebook and Instagram, it's quite easier for you to generate results for a B2C, a small retail shop within Kampala, on day one. Okay. And that was more of like a learning curve, and the days and period to learn, okay, the basic setting up of things was quite easy. So that was more of like the paying off bills aspect, the area, a very valuable and a handy skill that honestly worked me through, pushed me through between 2018, 2019, 2020, even throughout COVID. But then during COVID and so on and so forth, I started to test and be like, but I've learned email, I have all the necessary skills. So how best can I, you know, do this? And when I started doing emails, when I started testing them out once again, I wasn't doing it like on a larger scale. Now it was more of like trying to build as many people as possible as I can, building an email list. But since I had no functioning business up until 2020, it didn't yield anything as of service. So by then it was on hold, but more of like I could take perhaps side gigs, within companies that could be like, hey, perhaps could you help us? How best could we write emails? Now, this was before people could go on the internet and perhaps do what normally normal people are doing, go on ChatGPT, punch in an email, and gives you an entire copy, or go on LinkedIn and download an entire template. So that did come along. So it was more of like jumping various hoops and so on and so forth. And the reason, or one of the main reasons, was there was many tools, and now it has gotten worse, which to date, rather by the beginning of last year, led to building Acumen, which I'll perhaps talk about in a few. But there were so many tools. So, and I'm going to explain this. So, for instance, if I was selling software or website development, and I needed clients within perhaps Uganda, and those clients, first things first, that particular service is kind of heavy. No particular business is outright trying to buy software. But then these are more of like the clients that you're currently dealing with. So you need to sell their software packages, but then you don't know, let's say, whether, for example, a company like Zoom would need that particular service. Okay. So it became more of like a challenge. Okay, what tools are available at their disposal? Well, there is perhaps LinkedIn Sales Navigator. You could perhaps log into it and try to mess around with it and see the results or see the outcome it gives you. Okay. Then that at least gives you a feel of how the search happens, the data happens. You first get an entire scope. Okay. And the free LinkedIn aspect to see, okay, this company has this size, it's located in this aspect, and so on and so forth. So for most of that, I would say it was, and I believe it's still for most people, it was more of like, okay, I can just leave do that the bare minimum side, just filter by location. But then, okay, where do I find perhaps the email contacts of these particular people that I'm going to use? And now that I don't use, or actually 100%, I no longer use any of these tools for anything that we're going to hit on. I'm free to say them. So then my favorite or go-to tool at the moment was Apollo.io. Anyone can check it out. It's a massive B2B database. Very handy. Actually, it helped me to secure the $2.4 million worth in contract that I'm going to share a bit. Maybe perhaps you'll try to blur out their names because I wouldn't want to get in trouble. But yeah, so there was the emails aspect of this particular clients. Okay. To me, that was okay. Like first step one, okay, you have the database. Rather, you have where you're going to find the people that you're going to sell to, rather that you wish to sell to, and then you have their emails. So two things. Okay, it sounds easy. It sounds like okay. Now it's an end game. So then it became into this whole massive blasting out of emails. Okay, and once again, just starting out, I'm like, okay, how can I maneuver around? You know, just testing with my at Gmail. Very terrible mistake to do. Never send B2B professional high ticket emails from your Gmail. Okay. I did that, but for my particular reasons was the financial side of things. Not willing to invest it in a bit, but after realizing, I was like, okay, this has to stop. But anyways, the scenario that led to this transition, one, that particular email scenario was never brought up to me with people that I was pitching at, never at any single point. But I watched it through an interview whereby the guest was like, you should never use your personal Gmail address, or you should never use a Gmail address, which is more of like a careless thing that I should have thought of, and I'm sure everyone could have thought of. And now, emails are very cheap, to work around. $15 a month. A Google's Worksuite email works very better. It's demarcated and so on and so forth. Anyways, in that process, I'm like, okay, so now I have the emails and now I'm sending them. Writing the emails, hey, let's say, hey, Prosper, I'm Musoke from Uganda. I would like perhaps to connect with you and, we see how to work around and so on and so thing and so on and so forth. So that email goes out. And for some reasons, it worked. Okay? It worked, but it was more of like a genie sort of experiment. Things are working, but you don't know why they are working. Terrible thing because in business, you need that predictability. You need to be able to predict if money is constantly coming in, if clients are coming in, if meetings are coming in, you're on a safer side. But if you can't guarantee that, then it gets hard for you even to sell. You get? So that predictability aspect was one major key thing that I was like, you know what, I really need to work upon figuring it out. But I didn't give it much attention or rather any focus. So I just kept on sending out these emails. And the biggest challenge was on the outdated data. Let me explain. Since I was particular reliant on LinkedIn, I realized that most people I was reaching out weren't as honest as they were, because we know it's, I like to call it the professional, like to call it the professional bragging. People like to throw in fancy words. I'm the CIO, CEO, CFO, CDO. Well, but
Positions
in
that don't
essence,
exist.
yeah, that they don't exist. You get, or maybe I changed the role and it's been like 6 months. I'm not working at that particular company, and so that was the data I was relying on to write these emails. Okay, so that became more of like a challenge. Okay, because you're writing an email and the prospect is like, yeah, but I don't know, I don't know that company, I don't know that particular person. Or emails get sent and they just bounce back, no one responds back. Or a meeting like this particularly would happen, and then you'd be awfully disconnected because of maybe perhaps how you worded the emails. And this was before, let's say, you could watch a video on YouTube, and the fact that you've watched the video, let's say 100,000 people, all using the same script, and you're mostly pitching to the same industry. So it quickly gets flagged out. Another key thing that I said, finding perhaps one particular source, because at least that helps you to learn more things, create a unified system, and then work around that. So the data aspect was more of like a huge draw, a huge pushback. Okay, to a point that I realized that within my current role at Hoxton, or previously out of Africa Cup, one of the main targets I was shared with. Okay, now first to clear out the air, Redial Media rebranded into Acumen. Okay, Acumen felt more a bit more live. It felt more of something big, more of like a vision, as I highlighted, and its incorporation is currently ongoing, and I'm going to hit about it in a few. And running Acumen on the side, landed me, or rather put me in a position to work with Oxton, a very impressive, very innovative investment and advisory firm within the financial instruments aspect. Nonetheless, as the main targets to deal with, I had tasked myself, okay, wanting more of like a target of, okay, who can I reach out to try and show to these guys that I'm the right person to do the job. Okay. So once again, I went back to the old ways of, you go to LinkedIn, punch in a Google search, use ChatGPT to see what you can find. And as I highlighted, you have a very limited data. And for most in cases, if you try doing some bit of research, you'll be able to articulate and be able to filter out. So that was the biggest challenge. Fine, I could build, let's say, like a 30 Excel sheet of, okay, who to reach out to by those filters. And now I had added on what I perhaps believe to be a golden boy at this particular moment, Crunchbase. Like, wow, okay, I can do Crunchbase since these guys are doing investments, since these guys are doing advisory, it could add a layer on top of it. Plus, it had the email side of things. So I was like, you know what, this is going to be actually more better. Okay. But carrying all the previous experiences, because I've missed out a lot of things, but carrying out all the previous experiences, I was like, okay, this is what I currently have. I have a professional email that I'm going to work around with. That was a lesson learned. Two, I already know how perhaps to write good emails. So maybe I'll just use AI to polish them a bit in order to remove out the best wording quite better. So the research always could begin like this. Okay, if I'm reaching out to, let's say, well, if I want clients that can be outsourced services too, because that's the tricky part. Let's say finding investors, that's quite easy. Even right now, you can just punch in that particular service. But finding a client that you could outsource services to tends to be even more hard, because you don't know if they need that. So what I resorted to and what I came to a hard realization was, and I got to that when I was at my 2 3 weeks trip in Nairobi, that these big clients, the B2B, high governments want to be rich and they have this dire need. And I'm going to use perhaps an unpopular example, but perhaps most people would relate to. It's like finding that very pretty girl and you're unsure to whether to approach because you think everyone is approaching. But when you do, you find out, wait, no one is speaking with this particular person. So that was more of like a realization. But in doing so, while doing all these outreaches, I reached out to one, the Uganda Tourism Board, a very, very big body within Uganda. And the main role or the main objective into going to this was to first things first, find ways to synergize, but more of like provide value to them. And once or other, when this happens, then perhaps it's quite easier to sell to these guys. Yeah, but I was working more of like alone. Does it hopefully make sense? I was working more of like alone. I wasn't more like guided, like okay, try to sell this, but I was working on sell this because with emails in particular, or rather within B2B, if you have perhaps sort of like a USP, a unique selling point, it gets easier to win those guys over despite what you're selling. If you have 100 things that you're selling, those could be like one add-on, but if you have one particular entry point, that's better. So for me, it was the outsourced services for this particular client, Oxton. Now, Rotas Africa Capital, now Oxton. And it was more like, okay, if we're selling outsourced services, who fits kind of quite into that criteria? But I'm still guessing, like, okay, let me go on LinkedIn and see within the B2B side who I can shoot to and they're able to get back to me. And well, Uganda Tourism Board responded back, had a meeting. The very first interaction was, okay, we'll prepare perhaps a masterclass. This was live, it was done, it was a 5-7 days. But leading to that particular event, okay, there were sequences of outreaches that were being pushed out, and this is another thing. Maybe perhaps I don't know if most people have realized it that have been doing emails or B2B campaigns is that B2B sales cycles take a lot of time. You need to be a bit more creative and how you punch in quite several people. So I could perhaps get a company as I highlighted, UTB, find them, and then as I found them, I immediately, find like let's say three other key decision makers within that company. Reason why? If let's say I send an email to Prosper and Prosper doesn't respond or doesn't see an email for any specific reasons,
Mhm.
I can let's say ping someone and add Prosper into the CC section, and let's say ping Musoke. So then it becomes more of like, okay, maybe I don't understand what's going there, but it piques an interest. So that alone led to perhaps winning over these guys. But this particular assignment took over about 3 weeks to get an initial response back. And it was more of like, you know what, hey, hey Musoke, kindly get I wouldn't air out these people's names, recipient's name, sorry. I was like, okay,
Mhm.
ping, let's say ping Prosper to set up a meeting. Okay.
So,
And
so
for me, that
this is
was,
so this is what you now call sovereign data because this is data that you're being given and it's updated in real time, right?
yes, 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 yes. And I'm going to hint a bit more about that in a
Right.
few. So it's like, okay, so hint, talk to Prosper. So immediately when I wrote to Prosper and be like, hey, Prosper, let's say the initial person I reached out to was like, um, reach out to Prosper and see when perhaps you can set up a meeting. In most cases, the immediate action would be, or rather, what you would think of would be, you know what, let me wait until they respond back. But once again, you have just reached out, rather in this particular instance, I had just reached out to this particular people, this particular group of clients. They are not interested in me, they aren't interested in anything I said, but maybe what I did was a bit more creative. It caught their attention. Okay. So the proactiveness helped out a lot. And immediately these guys were like, okay, as after I wrote out an email, I was like, okay, how does let's say Wednesday look like for you? Before you know it, they're like, you know what? Yeah, that works. Kindly come through our office. Okay. At that particular instance, I pegged someone that is a right fit to do that particular thing, that particular job, to take on the lead from there, which is another key thing I also learned. Within the B2B side of things, particularly within my role, I've come to a finite conclusion that I do not have to do everything myself. If I'm good at setting up these meetings, I'm going to do that 100%. Then I'll let the meetings be handled by someone who has that industry experience that could articulate it a bit better. And I didn't fumble it up at a single point, and that was at the beginning of December, December 2024, up until um, March, because that was within the period that I hit that milestone figure. And that was more of like, okay, the benchmark. We get a meeting, this particular person handles it. End of story. Okay. So upon the meeting reaching, it was a physical engagement. That's why I started to appreciate and respect more like the process and to try and refine it. And before you know it, the meeting, transpired into our next events. So the next event, so obviously, you know what, hey guys, would love perhaps for you to set up a masterclass that works. Mind you, I didn't see the bigger picture at the moment. But after getting the minutes, it was like, okay, these guys are governing every tour business within Uganda. The bigger, every tourism business, every tour operator that is working within Uganda is governed under the Uganda Tourism Board. When that meeting happened and the masterclass was set, the target threshold was over 5,000 people, rather 5,000 tour operators that are operating within Uganda, with from the central, eastern, western, and so on and so forth. And the masterclass was set. It was obviously virtual, and it was very immersive because I was in the background trying to learn, okay, and see how it's working. And the engagement rates were so good. Okay. However, the communication aspect was a bit down because it was out of control from the client, from the
Mm.
people that we had targeted with. And since I wasn't in the initial meetings, the physical meetings, I didn't know more of like the logistics. For me, a win was, let's get a meeting and see the next steps out.
Okay.
So
Let's
yeah,
talk a little bit about Acumen, the intelligence engine that you actually created. First of all, tell us, because now we understand, um, how this came about. But in your own words, what problem were you solving when you built this?
okay. So there are about 4 or 5 problems. So one, there are so many tools to work around and use. I've highlighted. Two, there's so many you need to integrate. You need to learn. You need to actually know how to perhaps use LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Very easy. You can watch a video and that is done. But one of the main challenging aspect is that data is knowing, is this a right signal for them to buy? It's not the same thing with ads. Is it the right period to them to buy? Do they have a need? So that is one main key thing that transferred into Acumen, and this is built into more of like features that Acumen does. And maybe perhaps I can share a quick walk around of how Acumen does, and so on and so forth. But it was more of like, okay, are these people rightful to target? Two, or rather three, if I'm sending an email, is this the right email address for this particular person to send to? One thing I didn't hit about whether the main constant nagging challenge was, despite how and multiple emails being sent, majority bounced because most people change roles, most people lie on so many things. So you end up reaching out to a person that left their organization that is no longer working with them. The other thing was, okay, the campaigns themselves, because now you have the research, you have all the news. Let's say um, Zoom does X, Y, and Z. So if Zoom is doing all this, where can I plug in and perhaps enter it to them? So that entire research. because when you look at, let's say, the sources that you're going to rely on, whether it's Google, whether it's LinkedIn, you're going to be short-sighted. You're only going to see what's out there. So with Acumen, the main focus, or rather the main goal, was to, okay, find and build more of like a proprietary engine that does a lot more than anything, that does the research aspect that I highlighted, but in seconds. Okay.
Right.
And that was done, oh yes, or that was done by using several API tools that could emulate all these processes. But in the process of emulating, it's relying on experiences, okay, that have been doing over the past years, and so on and so forth. So the research aspect, the emails themselves, the sequences, and so on and so forth. But I could say there were main key things were the backbone, which was the research, the emails, and the know-how. Basically, how you would go perhaps into ChatGPT and be like, okay, what do you know about food? Or as random as it may sound, and get that data back. That was more of like, okay, the aha moment, because that became something that I could verify. Even as we speak, it could be easier for me to identify who I can reach out and sell to software services and get a pre-done list, or the pre-vetted database of who to engage with, plus their emails. That was something that I constantly suffered with, and everyone suffers with. You get email addresses that are bouncing left and right center. This email doesn't exist, or this works. And that was the only thing that really and truly inspired and led to building Acumen. So Acumen is being built, has been built since 2025 up until date, finalized everything. And in that process of building and doing so, we're able to learn to particular clients. One does software, and that one does, it renders social impact work. An agency that does social with NGOs. With them, we're able to reach and contact and perhaps work with, the likes of the Mandela Foundation, being able to work with the Save the Children, being able to work with FinChurch AIDS, and all these were conversations that were happening, or meetings that were happening in split months. Happening today, sending an email, because now okay, these guys are going to respond. You send an email, they'll respond back, objective done. Okay. And that, in a nutshell, I would try to explain of how Acumen became to be. One, it was the big data. It is still so much data that is out. If you need companies that that need software, it is so much for you to work around. So when you get those particular clients, then what next? Then you have to send an email to them. Okay, after an email, what next? What if they do not reply? When do you drop off? Okay, and all this is data that you're constantly saving within your emails. So
Mm.
within this particular aspect, because within Acumen, all these were features that were being built. Okay, like, okay, if I sent an email to perhaps prospect one, or prospect B, or prospect C, or D, or any other, and they responded back to me, and we had the meeting, then what next? The meeting is done. Okay, let's move on. But at the back of the mind, I have data, rather, I have all this data, but I don't know how best to utilize it. Then this massive data is then injected into Acumen to learn from it. Okay? So that alone replaces the entire department of people that would particularly do the research for yourself, do the research for you, and you're able to go back and learn from it. Okay. So
Mm.
quickly, I'm going to perhaps show you just a glimpse overview of how this looks like to make it quite make more sense.
Yeah,
But
sure.
before maybe that is shared, yes, yes. But maybe before I share that, I would like to make it also clear that Acumen is more of like an internal facing system. I kept it that way because I once again realized that when features and tools are out there, it's
Hmm.
quite easier to replicate within the market. And you could say, you could just put it out and see how it's in the market and see what the potential outcome is going to be. But I've come to a realization that it's a bit more niche. If it's reserved within that lenses, then it keeps it quite makes making it make more sense. Shortly, I'm trying to open up it here with you. But yeah, in a nutshell, Acumen replaces the sales, replaces the marketing, replaces everything that I highlighted. The messy data, people that exited the roles, what to send, when to send, all being done within that particular system. In doing so, it's powered by APIs, mostly within the Google Gemini 3 to help within some of the research, a very key figure. And then it does more of like what I've explained in a nutshell. So in a nutshell, that is what Acumen does, and that's what Acumen came to be. It came to be as a result of data being insufficient, data not being relied upon, email addresses bouncing left and right, even with tools that you're going to see within the market, you get. Just because you saw, let's say, Apollo.io, a very big tool that I use so many times, it doesn't mean an email that you're going to find there is going to be reliable for you to send to. So that was, yeah, an aha moment. And right now we're finalizing with our incorporation steps, as well as hosting, finalizing with the left outcomes and the left areas. I've not been doing much publicity on the internet because I was like, once this is done, once the setup process and setup phases are done, then everything can be out within the market for for people to test out, for clients to try and already see that. But with Acumen and the particular clients, we've been able to get over 30 to 40 meetings and about 30 to 45 conversion rate that turned into actual clients for the two
Wow.
clients that have been working, yes, for the two clients that have been working with. Okay.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you so much. So that has been maybe perhaps a very big key figure and a very big realization moment. And that hack has shaped everything. I've been developing it for over, I would say, yeah, I would say, yeah. A year would be an understatement, but yes. But just to summarize, I've went over and over again. It replaces everything that I've highlighted rather than having five research tools, five teams that are doing one particular job. If I know my target is to find clients that need software, where do I find those clients? And when I do, good, that's enough for me. Okay, when am I responding? Rather, when am I pushing out to them? And where can I find reliable data that can be used? Because there's always that synergy aspect. Once that is figured out, then I can, perhaps build out my entire campaign. Okay. But normally this would have taken you, let's say, like an entire week to come up with this particular data. Also, you're not being sure. But with emails and B2B, you need to always be able to move fast, get, let's say, like build your entire list of 20 or 30, build that out, that entire list, and then push it out on the internet and be able to learn from that data. So that data that comes out, which I like to call the vault, then gets ingested. Then it's learned from. Okay, we do not, let's say, reach out to anyone that we have already reached out from this particular domain. We do not send, rather, we do not use this particular call to action button because it doesn't work, because it doesn't do this. And all this is being done for you because of your particular DNA, similarly to how you would explain about yourself. Okay. So we're powered by APIs and we're powered by a bit of AI to accomplish majority of these tasks. But in a nutshell, that's kind of the front facing of how we do things and how we kind of operate. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you so much. Now, obviously, from what you're saying, a lot of people would have, let's say, five different tools, and each of them wants a different subscription. So that means you have to be paying those subscriptions, having to go to those webinars, learning curves, and things like that. You've already put it into just one particular thing. But does that not there's something that you mentioned that technology should just enable human ingenuity, not replace it. And I kind of feel like, in this age of AI, that is sort of blurring the lines. What does that balance look like in the age of AI using a tool like yours?
Yeah. So you've used a very good example that with businesses, particularly what I've come to realize is everything should just complement, shouldn't make things sophisticated. If I need to perhaps write an email, it shouldn't be something that I need to spend 5 hours trying to think of, okay, I write catchy word to get a response, an initial response. That deteriorates literally everything. But maybe perhaps if I am doing the research side and all this is being done in a shortest time frame, you get, because not to because most things aren't that quite accurate. I don't know if I got your question right and if I tried to explain or rather share, but that's kind of how perhaps I would explain it or rather bring it out to you.
Right.
Yes. Yes. So I wanted to perhaps maybe share with you how Acumen looks like. So as you can see, we have quite some data, we have quite some information within. So normally this is how Acumen would look like. So everything that I was perhaps talking and hinting about are the various features within the system. So immediately when I logged in, I have various features. I have various areas to walk around, other to walk around. We have the workspace. I would define this as the thinking area, and each and every particular aspect has its own main course of role. So let me quickly begin with the workspace. We have the command app link. Try to be as technical as I can because it's quite easier, if I may say. So if, as I highlighted, if perhaps I wanted to discover or find which particular client would need Acumen in this particular instance, I have the Intel library, or rather what I would like to call the thinking brain. And with this in particular, I'm trying to shortcut my way to the research side. So by random, I'm just going to go with the very first aspect. For instance, identify UK and Asian consulting firms where one closed deal is worth £100,000. The goal is to pitch Acumen as their fully managed business development relations operation. Okay. So normally that perhaps would be like a search that you would punch into, let's say, Google or even ChatGPT, and you'd be like, okay, let me try doing some research and see what I can initially find out. So as you can see, the research aspect is taking place, and what it's currently doing, it's looking at the various aspects. It's looking at the emails, it's looking at the publications on the web. We're looking at the various outlets, comparing, okay, if let's say LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all these platforms are like, you know what, this particular client is based in the UK and they are doing consulting, can we confirm? Okay, let's perhaps look at the website. Let's look at the registrars, the business registrars. Let's try to look at some, maybe the clients that backlink to them, that wrote to them, and see if we can find anything. What I get in return are what are called or termed as cards. The main role, just to summarize, these cards are basically give you more of like an overview of, okay, who fits that criteria. And immediately when we punch in a research, you're going to see several and several things. Now, This particular card in itself explains or rather covers various things. Covers the location because we requested for that. Has a rating aspect. Once again, that has a various overview, has a various information that we're going to need when building, our list. One thing that I highlighted, because just because a company is more of like a shell on LinkedIn doesn't indicate they're good to go. Anyways, we have a capital node. Now, this emphasizes that, you know what, they're in a bit of a sweet spot to reach out to because they have the finances to figure around. Obviously, we put in quite unthinking effort in, okay, how best to determine why this should be like this, and so on and so forth. We have the ratings aspect. Basically, this looks at, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good or how positive are we that this is a likely client for us to work with, which is around 8.5 out of 10. Within the industry, about anything that's above 5 to a bit of inner sweet spot. Anyways, we have a win probability of how likely are we to win based off one, the client. In this particular instance, it's Acumen. How are we likely to win them? It's about 78%. Then what signals are we verifying? Okay, we have, you know, various areas what that particular client does. Now, as I highlighted with the few examples that I shared, in most cases, you need to perhaps, let's say, look at their LinkedIn, look at their X, look at their website, and get all this data, and so on and so forth. Now, since we're working with consulting, there's ultimately the financial aspect where they kindly fall at more of like what we estimate, kind of like how, let's say, Forbes estimates, how this company is worth, or rather what they are doing. In this particular instance, we have a figure, and this is data that we are relying on in real time. We have the principal person, basically the first key person that's making key decisions within this particular whether within this particular company. Sasan Danmeshed, you can perhaps type in the name and see whether they are remotely connected with this particular client. And in case I wanted to perhaps dig more and I wasn't so sure, I could just quickly verify, run a deep, thorough investigation, and be able to say, okay, is this the right person or this is not? The only way that I could do this was get that particular name, type it into the internet, Google or go on LinkedIn, and see if it's referencing anything back outside that. Then, as it's running, you're obviously noticing that we have the uplink discovery, which is currently in real time doing the research on all the nodes because we specified 15. As you
Mm.
can see, we're doing research on the Moho consulting. So this alone has already done the research work, has already done most work that is being done within the market side of things. Then we have the email addresses. One key thing that I struggled with. Basically, this looks or that replicates your LinkedIn, finding the emails or your Apollos, and so on and so forth. So, in a nutshell, we already have this particular client, these ones. Okay, we have this one, we have this one, we have this one, we have like literally everything that you need before you're going to reach out. Maybe a bit. So, in case wanted to dive in a bit more deep into this particular prospect or this particular client, it would make more sense. Okay, what do I need, or what do I have at my disposal, or how accurate can I be? Okay, so able to see various information about the ownership and structure, and every card, mind you, has everything and the key decision makers. Meaning, in our campaign, these are the various people that are to be reached out. If Michael does not respond back, maybe we can hit Olga. And with with sending an email to Olga, we need to perhaps engage with them in a particular way. If we're reaching to Soban, something similar. And what drive to that? Obviously, there are various signals that I was highlighting. That if, let's say, go on LinkedIn, go on Twitter, go on YouTube, you need several information.
For instance, we have some of the recent events. We pick this to 90 days because that's the different cycle. Almost every B2B client would make major announcements, whether they would be hiring, onboarding, and so on and so forth. So we have various signals to work around with, and they're all communicating one key thing. But yeah, I have perhaps two or three of my favorite tools, and perhaps allow me to share a bit them with you. One is the Oracle link, and I define this as your personal assistant that you're working with in real time. And I'm just going to give you like an example. Say you're going into a meeting, and then in the meeting, you're not so sure, you're not yet certain what you're going to say, or you're not quite sure what to say or not. So we built out an Oracle voice link. There, as per the last research that I did, was there are tools within the market, about two or three, but they are a bit more internal facing and they are not as comprehensive as Acumen does. But maybe to share a bit, with this, with the Acumen, rather with these keys, in most cases we are dealing with the API, rather we are dealing with data that we're going to use. So we ask a question, be like, hey, what do we know about this particular instance? Or what do we know about this particular prospect? When and as this data is coming through, we act upon the data. And when that data comes in, we're able to download an entire profile. And this is done for almost each and every prospect and each and every client that we are working with and we are dealing with. So, in a nutshell, there was quite so many things that I didn't highlight or didn't hint on because it would have make this quite long and quite extensive. But in a nutshell, that's kind of how Acumen works and how it came to be, and more of like what it's currently solving at. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you so much for taking us through that. You see, while you were going through this, I just noticed that the problem that you were trying to solve earlier on in your life is what you are now creating, for others. And it's become the foundation of what you're creating today because, your frustration with generic outreach, you've now solved and created a tool for that. Now, for those that are watching, I mean, obviously we need to wrap up. How can people get a hold of you, or where can they go to try and maybe try out this product or see if it actually works for them?
Oh, okay. So at the moment, as I highlighted at the very beginning, once the incorporation is done with Acumen and so on and so forth, the websites and all sorts are going to be up. For now, the best place of contact would be LinkedIn. Okay, we've already done the website, it's already done, the emails are already been chosen and decided. So all that will be updated on my LinkedIn. But LinkedIn right now is the perfect go-to environment in this particular instance. I'm always active, even though I'm not creating content at this particular moment. Most people are just creating content with no inherent value to offer, but just regurgitating everything that is out within the market.
Absolutely. Well, this was a very impressive conversation, and I'm just learning, how you took a challenge that you were facing and you went on and created something that is now about to help other business people find and get the clients that they're looking for. This is quite remarkable. I can't wait to see what people are going to do with this information. And if you're watching this right now, please check the links in the show notes. I will definitely be putting the links so that you can connect with Musoke. There's so much that could be discussed about this, but the gist of it all is, Musoke had a problem and he went on and solved for it. Now we have good data. Musoke, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. I look forward to engaging back, Prosper.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see what people are going to do with this. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep building your own path to prosperity. Bye for now.